Right, time for us to get started. Good to have everybody with us today. We are wrapping up Revelation. We concluded the study of the text last Wednesday. All this stuff is online. So today, as we did earlier, we're just going to do a big summary of the last big section here. So I call this the final exam. And so we had papers in the back that has a series of questions, and that's what we're going to do today, just kind of walk through these questions. And this will serve as kind of a big overview of the book, and hopefully it'll be really helpful for you. It's been 7 years since we've had a detailed study of this book, and I don't know if it'll be another 7 years till we get back to it again. I don't know if I'll be able to do it then or not. I don't know. I'm getting on the old side here, so we'll see what happens. But there's two things I really want you to walk away from Revelation with. And Wednesday night will be our final class, and we're going to talk about some practical lessons we learned from Revelation. But the two things I really want you to get from this, first of all, is don't be afraid of this book. There are a lot of people who will use this as a springboard to predicting dates. They have a lot of current events they think are found in the book of Revelation, and because our friends go there so quickly and so easily, it's easy for us to be intimidated, and just don't be afraid. I think it's one of the most encouraging books in the Bible. And, when we think about when I'm a little bit down, I need some encouragement from God, we think about the Psalms, we think about Philippians. I want Revelation to be in your toolbox. I want you to think about that. This is a good book, and it has a great message for us. The second thing I want you to get from this book, in your own wonderful way, is to be able to tell the story. Okay? Now, if someone's to say, well, I've never opened the Bible before, what can you tell me about Jesus? And all of us ought to be able to walk through and say, well, here's Jesus. Here's how the Bible presents Jesus to us. And I think in some way, we need to be able to do that with the book of Revelation. Now, you're not going to get every rock and every frog and every little detail, because sometimes you got to really dive in there to get that. But here's the picture. Here's the picture. It begins by telling us about these troubled times. John, the apostle, and he's given a vision. It starts in the 4th chapter. There's a door opened up in heaven. And John's invited to come up and look what's behind that door. And behind that, he's been told these are things that's going to happen pretty soon. And so he sees God. And God has this book in his hand. And this book is sealed up and no one can see it. No one can open up. What is the message? And Jesus steps forward. One by one, he opens up all these seals. And with each seal, there's a message about God. It's a message about the times they live in. That as the gospel went to all the world, right behind it came persecution. That's where those people were. God understood this, and he could see that to them. And so as each of the seals is open, we come to the 5th seal, where the cry of the Christians who've been killed. Why won't there be justice? And then as we get to that last seal, there's a series of trumpets. Trumpets calling the judgment of God, the answers to those prayers. We're introduced to a dragon, who's the devil. We're introduced to a beast, which is just ugly looking and powerful. And that's the empire that the dragon or the devil is using to influence all these people. We're introduced to a false prophet that used deception to confuse the people. We're introduced to a harlot who rides that beast. That's the emperors that govern this mighty empire. But one by one, they're all sent away to judgment. The harlot, the false prophet, the beast, and then the dragon himself. And the story ends with the triumph of God and his people in heaven. And you know what I just told you there in about 2 minutes? I just told you the book of Revelation. You see that? And that's what I want you to be comfortable with. And to understand that's what this is about. Yeah, there's a 1,000-year reign in there, and we'll talk about that. And there's this, and what about Armageddon? What's mentioned in there, but don't get all excited about that, But to see that this is a message, a powerful message for the people of God, and it trickles down to every generation. And really the message began before the book of Revelation, when we had the people of God taken away to Babylonian captivity. They were in fiery furnaces. Then we have them in Persia, and they're in lions' dens. We go before that, and there's the oppression of the Egyptians. And God has always been there for his people. Sometimes the people of God died. But God realized that wasn't the end. We know that's not the end. The end is being with God. And so that message just prevails over and over and over. No government, no armies, no political powers can change the will of God. God is more powerful than anything. And so, as the lesson was a while ago, if I am a friend of God, I'm going to be okay. What's the worst thing anyone can do to me? Well, they can kill you. Is that all you can do? Big deal. Then I'm with God real fast. And Jesus says, do not fear the one who can take your life and do no more. See that? And so this idea of revelation is a powerful message that God wins. And that's how the Bible ends. It ends with that message. Now, let me say this real quickly, then we'll get to our questions here. So next week, we begin new classes. First Sunday of April begins our new quarter. We're going to have in here the book of Genesis. Now, we're not going to do it chapter by chapter. There are 50 chapters in Genesis. We have 11 Sundays this first quarter. Can't do it. So we'll probably, hopefully, maybe, with our fingers crossed, get through the flood. Okay? So we're going to really just cover the first few chapters of Genesis to see how this thing starts. And there's some powerful, powerful lessons there I want us to look at. And then as we go through this, we've got to deal with the culture we live in, okay? Where 6 out of 10 people believe in evolution today. And most people believe that the Bible's not true. So we're going to deal with a lot of things like that. So that's one of the classes. That's what's going to be in here. Jason's going to be teaching people who cross paths with Jesus. And then we have a special class for young people. We got some different young men in our assembly who are going to be teaching various subjects about young people who've met Christ. Because we begin the spring quarter, we're talking in here about starting and beginnings and things such as that. So having said all that, let's go to our questions and just walk through this. Again, this is just kind of a summary. Good opportunity. If you missed something, I didn't get it the first time, Roger, explain that again, and we'll try our best to do that just to connect you with these things. But what a great, great book it is. And I hope if you stayed with us, you've read it. It might have been the first time you've ever read Revelation cover to cover, but it's a great book. And it has a great message. And no matter what we read about in the news, what we see about, wars in our times, God's going to win. How do you know that? Book of Revelation. God wins. And that's the only thing that matters. Okay, so let's start off here. First question here on our outlines here. It says, in chapter 12, we're introduced to a pregnant woman, a child born to her, and a dragon. Who are these people? Let's go first of all backwards to front. Who is the dragon? That's right. Verse 9 of chapter 12 identifies him as the devil. And so later on, we get to the 13th chapter, we're introduced to this beast. This beast gets his power from the dragon. What does that mean? He gets his power from the devil. Then later in chapter 13, when we read about, I may be reading ahead of time here, I don't know. We read about the false prophet. The false prophet speaks as the dragon, speaks as the devil, okay? So if you kind of imagine a big chess game, it's put on the table here, these are the enemies. And they're big, and they're powerful. But we know what's going to happen at the end. Who's the child in chapter 12? Most likely Jesus. I mean, everything around it sounds like Jesus. It just sounds like Jesus. The woman, who's the woman? This is where it gets a little more difficult. Who's the woman? God's faithful people. Now, we could go real narrow and say it's Mary who gave birth to Jesus. But at the end of chapter 12, which will be question 2 here in just a minute, the dragon makes war with her children. So if we make the woman Mary specifically, then they only made war with Mary's children. So I think more so it's the faithful of God. That's where Jesus came from, the faithful of God. Promises back to Abraham, all the way back to Adam and Eve when they first sinned, that the seed of woman, that's Jesus, all the way through Isaac, Abraham, all these prophecies, the coming Messiah is all pointing towards Jesus. And so most likely that's who it is. So number 2, in these last verses of chapter 12, identifies the plans of Satan. What are they? Make war with the people of God, okay? Make war with the family of God. That family specifically would have been these 7 churches. That's what they were going through. So when they said, well, why is it this guy over here who bows down to this idol doesn't have anybody harassing him? Why is it this guy over here who believes the moon made him can go to the store and buy groceries? Because I believe in Jesus, I lose my job. Because I believe in Jesus, he says a gallon of milk is $1,000. I don't have $1,000 for 1 gallon. It's just not right. Well, why is that? Because the dragon is making war. That's what's going on. And that war continues until when? When's that war end? When one of the enemy is defeated. And the enemy that's going to be defeated is the dragon. Okay? So when you get to chapter 20 and the devil is sent away to where he belongs and to torment, then that war technically ends. So to say that is to say, right now the devil is making war with you. And you might think, well, I got this goofy coworker, and every time I walk in, the whispering stops. I know they're talking about me. I got family members who can't stand me because I go to church on Sunday. I got this, I got this. What's behind all this? Why are they acting this way? There's a dragon who's making war with you. You see that? And that's what's going on. And that's going to continue to go on as long as you walk with Jesus and he's alive until God deals with him at the very end. And so sometimes we just say, well, that person's just crazy. Or this family member is just nuts. No, behind it all, most times, is the dragon. Influencing people as he influenced nations, as he influenced others. And so again, that helps us to kind of keep that perspective. Number 3, in Revelation 13, 2 beasts appear, one from the sea, one from the land. What relationship do they have with the dragon? Okay, verse 2, dragon gave power to what we may call the land beast, the sea beast, because he came out of the sea. And then verse 11, the dragon, the beast that came out of the land, he spoke as the dragon. That's when becomes a false prophet, which is our next question here. The beast from the land is later referred to as what? The false prophet. Chapter 16, verse 13, 16:13, 19:20, and 20:10. All 3 of those verses refer to the dragon, the beast, and now he's called the false prophet. And how unique that he speaks as the dragon, someone that's just not right. Okay? Anytime you got something, just say. Okay, number 4. Revelation 13:18 identifies the mark of the beast. What is significant about 666? I was doing something just the other day. What was I doing? And it came up in my calculations, 666. I thought, here we go. Here we go. So, what would you make of 666? I wrote an article. Let me just deviate for a second. I write this blog, Jumpstarts, and I wrote one coming out, I think Thursday, about predicting the date of Jesus' return. And there's a long list of people through the histories. And there was a guy in the year 1666 who took the 1,000 years and the mark of the beast, 666, and said, Jesus is coming in 1666. Well, guess what? He didn't come, did he? He was wrong. So what are we to make of 666? It's not 7. That's the best answer. And And what's special about 7? 7 is related to God. How many churches were there? 7. How many seals on that book? 7. How many trumpets were there? 7. How many bowls of wrath? 7. Do you see that over and over and over? 7 comes from heaven, and it doesn't have to be 666. It could be 6,000,000, 6,000. Just keep adding 6s as long as you want to go, and 6s were never 7. That's the point. It's not God. This is identifying those that are of man, those that are wrong. So don't be afraid of that number. You drive somewhere and you see a car in front of you, 666, don't slow down. Don't mean that he's got horns on his head and he's going to hit you, okay? If you get some change and the change comes back to being $6.66, don't say, oh, I got to buy something else, so it just changes that. Don't be afraid. That number is just a number. And what it means is it's not of God. It's not of God. And so it's associated. Who wears that mark? It's called the mark of what? The beast. And who does the beast get its power from? The dragon, Satan. So 666 is associated with wrong. Okay? And so God doesn't actually use physical signs, physical things on our forehead, physical numbers like that. This, again, symbolism, going back to our first midterms, going through the symbolism that this is, you got gods, those are not of God. These are not of God. Okay? Number 5, 2 important things come out of Revelation 14. The 144,000, what's that? Okay. How do you know, Miss Jean? It's figurative. If you talk to a Jehovah's Witness, they'll tell you it's 144,000. Actually, they get to live on earth again. They believe in a new earth. The rest go somewhere else. You may be saved, but once you get to 144,001, that one person's got to go somewhere else, because only 144,000 are here. So how do we know, not just to Gene, but to anyone, it's not just 144,000? How do we know that? I mean, that's a good number, but how do I know? Is that all that's going to be in heaven? I've been in bigger crowds than that. So how do we deal with that? Okay, let's read those. So how do I know that's just not 144,000? Okay. And again, two ways we know this. Okay, that's good to stay with the context there. Back in chapter 1, where we started the study, this is written in symbolism. Okay? If we're going to take 144,000 literal, we got to take 666 literal. We got to take 1,000-year reign literal. We got to take armies led by frogs as literal. And pretty soon, the whole book just changes. Okay? From day one, from the very first page, it tells us this is symbolism. This is a visionary book. Look in chapter 7 real quickly. Chapter 7, verse 9. As he talks about that number who comes out of the tribulation, Revelation 7, verse 9. And after these things I looked, behold, a great number which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. Well, I thought there was 144,000. He could count that. Now there's a number too big. Because 144,000 is like 666. It's representative. It's representing those who are of God. Will there be 144,000 in heaven? Yes. Plus. More than we can count. Okay? And so again, that's just a large number. Now, when you're being persecuted and you feel alone and you feel like, I'm by myself here, I'm like little Elijah hiding in my cave, it's easy to think that, I don't know if we're going to make this. But you realize that God has this number, a massive number, and that's what's going to be saved. That's it. That's a problem, isn't it? That's a problem. I remember sitting down with a Jehovah's Witness talking to her about that. I said, you're not of the 144,000. She goes, how can you say that? You're judging. I said, read the text. Are you Jewish? No. Are you male? No. You just discounted yourself. If it's literal, you see. But it's not literal. It's just a representative number. Again, and again, you will hear your friends, you'll hear out in the community that number used that way, okay? And so again, don't be concerned about that. And so it's just those who follow the Lamb. And as we went through that text, God knows those who are His. And the day you became baptized and started walking with Jesus, you were numbered among the 144,000. Okay? If we were to count up all the Christians in America, there's more than 144,000. If we were to count up all the Christians today on the planet, there's more than 144,000. So either we're going to say, well, a whole bunch of us are not going to make it, or this is just a number. A number that goes from the first century to the very last century, representing the people of God. So the harlot represents who? The harlot represents the one who rode the beast. And the beast, of course, I think was being controlled by the devil. It was the empire. And so the harlot would represent the rulers. She was controlling what direction this beast was going. The beast was being controlled by Satan. She was being controlled by Satan. And so we got devil through all this stuff. And all they're trying to do is make war with the people of God. Number 6. The purpose of the many bowls of wrath in chapter 16 are to mean what? It's a series of bowls. What are they supposed to mean? The bowls were poured out. Poured out on the earth, poured out in the rivers, poured out in the sun. That's it. When you hear the word wrath, that's not blessings. That's not good news, okay? So, and they're from heaven. The angels have these bowls, and the angels are pouring them out. So they're judgments of God. A lot of this is connected to that prayer in chapter 6 of those who were killed and laying under the altar. Why don't you do something? When will you do something? Here's when He's doing it, okay? And in His time, He does that. Number 7, we found as the enemies of God were introduced, the dragon, the beast, the false prophet, the harlot. What happened when it came time for their judgment? Yeah, it went backwards, didn't it? We were introduced, first of all, with the dragon, who's the devil, and then the beast, which is the empire, and then the false prophet, which is deceitful religion used by the empire, and then the harlot, who I think is the emperors, who's riding that evil nation. But when it came time to judgment, it just went backwards. Started with the harlot, and then the false prophet, and then the beast, and then the last one was the dragon. And all of them were judged. All of them got the punishment of God. God knows what's going on. Where is, number 8, where is the battle of Armageddon in Revelation? Okay, you got a verse there? Okay, let's go over there real fast. And while we're going over there, let's go grab this next question. What happens at this battle? Oh, you don't have to tell me. It's Russia. Everybody knows Russia. And it's China. Everybody knows it's China. And somehow it's the United States. It's always those three. Russia, China, United States. Now you can throw in some other nations hither and thither, but it's always those three, the big three. Russia, China, and the United States. And they're meeting somewhere, and there's going to be a nuclear war, and they're blasting each other. And as they're all about to disintegrate that planet Earth, Jesus comes down with His angels, and they're going to reign for 1,000 years. That's called what? Premillennialism, okay? And what do we know about premillennialism? It ain't so, okay? That's all you have to know. It ain't so. Jesus, as we'll see in a minute, is reigning right now. This battle is never really a battle. It takes place. It never really talks about that. So, Sue, you're aware? You're in chapter 16? Yeah, and verse 13, and I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frog, They are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the whole earth to gather them together for war of the great day of the Almighty. Now understand, if this is going to be a real battle, they're going to be led by frogs. I ain't too worried about that, are you? Because I can't have a real battle and then all of a sudden I flip back to figurative. It's either literal or it's figurative. You can't go back and forth. And they gathered together, verse 16, in a place called Harmageddon, which Har simply means hill, the hill Megiddo. Big place in the Old Testament where a lot of battles were won, where God was victorious. And in chapter 19, verse 19, I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and the armies assembled to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. But there's no war takes place. So the whole idea about Armageddon is just kind of a make-believe thing. Satan is trying to stop Christ, which he can't do. He tries to make war with the people of God, and he cannot accomplish that war because God is going to win. And that's really all you have to know about that, okay? Okay, turn to page number 9. The binding of Satan means what? He's limited, okay? He's limited. He's restricted. Does not mean he's defeated. Does not mean he still does not tempt. As we got to that chapter, remember, had that on that slide, that dog chained. A chained dog can still bite you if you put your hand up to him, but he can go only as far as the chain goes. And Satan can only go as far as God will allow him to go. And specifically here, it meant that he's no longer going to deceive the nations. God was going to keep that from happening. Number 10, the 1,000-year reign of Christ takes place when? Right now. We're in it. We're in it. Hebrews 1:1, Joel 2, Acts 2, it teaches us that we are in the last days right now. And so we are in the 1,000 years. Again, so for majority of people who claim to be religious, they're looking forward to that day coming. Someday Jesus is coming back to earth. He's going to sit in Jerusalem. That's why America has to keep Israel there. That's why you got to pour over millions of dollars there, because they got to be Israel there. Can't be Palestinians. Got to be Israel there. And when that all takes place, Jesus is going to sit there on the throne that David sat on and reign for 1,000 years. They miss it. Because to say that means that Jesus is not a king today. To say that there's no kingdom today. And as we looked at over and over, Jesus is reigning right now. Okay? Number 11. Is this all good? If you're missing this, say, hey, give me that again, because I'll be happy to give you that again, because these are the big things that's going to come up. Okay? No one's going to ask you about frogs. No one's going to ask you about that. No one's going to ask you about what does a seal mean. But they are going to ask you about 1,000 years. They are going to ask you about kingdom. Those are the big things that come up. And those are the things you need to be comfortable with. And so when somebody says Jesus is going to reign for 1,000 years, you say, I enjoy his reign right now. And so, a little side point here. Okay? I call it the model prayer. The world calls it the Lord's Prayer. Okay? Our Father who art in heaven, remember that one? Thy kingdom come. No, we don't say that today. Why? Because the kingdom's here. It'd be like saying, God, please let me be born. Open your eyes, son. You are born. So to pray for thy kingdom to come, it's here. Thank you for the kingdom. Thank you for letting me be part of the kingdom. May the kingdom grow and excel. Those are things I can pray. But when you hear somebody say, let us say the Lord's Prayer, first of all, Jesus didn't say that prayer because there's lines in there he would never say. He would never pray for his own forgiveness because he never sinned. And to say, thy kingdom come, infers that it's not here. See that? Simple little things. But you start putting all these dots together and you start saying, oh yeah, Jesus is reigning today. Okay? Number 11, what is the first resurrection? 20 verse 5. First resurrection. Mr. Craig, what's the first resurrection? Yeah. The first resurrection begins when you're baptized. You're buried with Christ. You're raised. What's raised? That's a resurrection to the newness of life. Romans chapter 6, 3 and 4. But specifically to these people was that they were going to be victorious over this tribulation they're going through. And so once again, when we think about certain words, when we have certain words, we have sometimes one definition in our mind. Well, resurrection means coming out of the grave. Well, no, not always. God uses it in different ways. Here's one way he uses it differently. And so it is a victory over death. Here, the victory over the dragon.
So why isn't the resurrection of Jesus not the first resurrection?
If we want to go technical, because it wasn't the first resurrection. Elijah raised somebody from the dead in the Old Testament. And then Jesus raised Lazarus. And then Jesus raised that young man who was being taken to the cemetery. So when we're talking about, if we're talking about first in time, who was the first person ever resurrected in the history? We go back to Elijah, okay? But here he's not talking about first ever. I think he's talking about, again, you've gone through this. There'll be a resurrection later on, but this is the first resurrection and began with our baptism. Number 12, the word new is used many times in Revelation 21. New heaven, new earth, it's used several times. I make all things new, it says. What does that new mean?
Well, you told us different.
Different.
But I have another.
Okay.
Why isn't it defined as something that didn't exist before, that which is new?
Well, that's different. I try to find a few words as I can use. But that is. So what I want you to see is, again, we use different words. You say, I've got a new car out there. Well, it still has four wheels, it has an engine, and it has takes gasoline. Okay? That is a new in time. Okay? Then there's new in kind. I got a new way to get home. What is it? Well, there's a helicopter parked out there. Well, that's different than the car, isn't it? That's different. And so when we talk about a new heaven, new earth, I make all things new. He's talking about different. So heaven, what's the conclusion of this? Heaven is not going to be like planet Earth. You got up this morning, most of you were hungry. You had to get some food going this morning, didn't you? Because you was hungry, okay? Had to put our clothes on, had to comb our hair, had to brush our teeth, had to come get in our car and drive down to the church house, okay? If you were thinking right, you probably brought your umbrella because it's going to rain today, right? I'm not going to do those things in heaven. I'm not going to sleep and then get up and say, well, I wonder what's in God's pantry today. I'm not going to be eating in heaven. I'm not going to get tired. I'm not going to be driving somewhere. That's here. Now, will I still be alive? Yes. But it's going to be different. That's what I want you to see. It's different. And how many times have we been to funerals where the preachers just try to make this planet up there? Oh, here's old Fred. Loves to fish. I can see Fred right now up in heaven on the pond of heaven with Peter putting a worm on his hook. No, you cannot. No, you cannot. I had an aunt that owned a little pizza shop, Aunt Alma. I think she ate too many of those pizzas. And when she died, the preacher said, I can see Alma right now flipping a pizza up in heaven. No, you do not. We're not eating pizza in heaven. No. But that's just a fantasy island concept that so many people have today. I've got a book, it's called Heaven. It's one of the most popular books out today. It even says all those little stick figure pictures you drew when you were 3 years old, somehow they're going to reappear up in heaven. And your pets are going to be up in heaven. And everything you like is going to be, well, really? Give me some verses. All things are going to be different. That's what I want you to see. So if that's how I see heaven, man, I can't wait to get up there and ride a roller coaster. No, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. All right, we got high step it here. So What happens to Satan, number 13, in Revelation? He's sent to the lake of fire, chapter 20, verse 10. Number 14, how is heaven described in the final chapters? It's a beautiful city. It's a paradise or a garden. Comfort, nourishing, and healing. No tears, no mourning, no death. How does Revelation end? An invitation to come, a warning not to tamper with the book, a promise that Jesus is coming, and a hope found in grace. Invitation, warning, promise, and hope. In your own words, what benefit would these suffering saints find in Revelation? What would you put there? 2 words. Jesus wins. Jesus wins. That's it. Jesus wins. I don't know how he's going to deal with Rome. I don't know how he's going to deal with Caesar and all his massive army. I don't understand all these things, but I know one thing. Jesus wins. The cries of the martyred saints are going to be answered. How can the book of Revelation be a benefit to me? Number 1, it's hopeful. When odds are against me, when I don't see the outcome, when problems seem greater than me, I see that God sees things I don't see. God can do things I cannot do. And what lessons do I learn from Revelation? We'll kind of grab into some of this on Wednesday, but God was doing things that the Christians did not see. They did not fully grasp that Satan was behind this. They didn't fully grasp that Satan was influencing this Roman Empire. They didn't fully grasp that the emperors were just puppets of Satan. They didn't fully grasp all that. God did. And God expected them to do what they could and to overcome. And so, in your own little world, there's things you don't see, but God does. And God's there with you to try to encourage you and help you through those things. All right, so Wednesday night we're going to kind of just pull out some of my favorite verses from Revelation and just kind of put a little bow on this. And if you got any final questions, bring them, and we will consider this a study. Thank you so much.